and thanks for joining me. I'm Suzette Lindemuth, the director and founder of the Center for Ageless Living. We're here in the Garden Gate Day Spa on the campus of the Center for Ageless Living, and since the spa and salon have been closed since March, I've had some time to really focus on my other passion, art. So this is an opportunity for you to join me in an exhibit of New Mexico women artists. I've been so fortunate to have a partner, Robert Simon, who shares my love for the arts. And we've been able to travel through New Mexico and purchase and meet many artists. Many of them are women who are currently working here in the Albuquerque, Taos, Santa Fe area. So I want you to join me today as we take a stroll through the exhibit. So grab a glass of wine or a glass of champagne and join me. But first I want to let you know that the information that I'm sharing with you has been obtained from mostly online resources, including Wikipedia and the artists' websites, as well as periodicals. So I'm going to start right now with one of my first artists, Aggie Sims. So Aggie was a woman who came to Santa Fe and really explored the Southwest. She loved the archaeological and petroglyphs of the area, and you can see from this large fabric painting her passion for what she saw. She used these images to create these wild expressions of what she saw here in the Southwest. She was an explorer and she had many passions, including she was a contractor and built her own home in Santa Fe. So this piece is one of our largest pieces in the show, and I just love her energy and the enthusiasm that she had for the Southwest. The piece that's next to it, the large piece, is another of her pieces. And this is actually a pastel called Prayer Sticks. Actually, I'm sorry, it's watercolor and ink. But she was such a wonderful woman and brought so much energy to her pieces. And I just find her to be one of the more extraordinary women in the shows. But also she had a great passion for great food and scotch, so that's probably why I really like her. No, just kidding. But anyway, she was honored by the New Mexico Governor's Award of Excellence and Achievement in the Arts. And she received that just a few months before she died from Alzheimer's disease in 1990. So Helen Green Blumenschein is another one of the artists that I've just recently been able to acquire. She was born in Brooklyn, New York, and she also was the daughter of very prominent artists in the Taos area, Ernest and Mary Green Blumenschein. They spent a lot of their time split between New York City and Taos. And Helen was actually very fortunate. She was able to travel to Europe and to study art. And she was best known for her prints, which she exhibited nationally and internationally in 1936 to 1945. The piece on the left is an oil on board on canvas called The Pond, and it's from El Prado, New Mexico in 1977. The piece next to it is called Morada, and it's from Talpa, New Mexico. Again, it's an oil on board. During World War II, Blumenschein actually served in the Women's Army Corps in the South Pacific. So many of these women were incredibly educated and well-traveled and well-versed and really served our country well. When her father died in 1960, Helen did donate the home in Taos to the Kit Carson Museum, which is now the Taos Historic Museum, and it is actually now available for you to go to. I'd encourage you to go to the Blumenschein house. It's a wonderful, wonderful home. The piece next is a Clara Wash Leland called Santa Fe Scene. It's an oil on board. Barbara Latham is another great artist, or Latham as she's known by. This piece on the left is actually called Paper Whites. It's from 1985. It's a colored pencil piece. She moved to Taos in 1925, and she became friends with Joseph Kane, the Foster Greeting Card Company, where she created a lot of cards, and then she started doing illustrations for children's books. She was introduced to her husband, the artist Howard Cook, by Victor Higgins, and they married in 1927. They traveled extensively in Europe, Mexico, and the American South, but they did have their base in Talpa, New Mexico, which is just south of Taos. The piece in the middle, called Hens and Chick, which is an oil on canvas, was bought at a small antique shop in Cimarron near the Philmont Scout Ranch. We were up there traveling, and Bob and I went into this small little antique shop. And I thought Bob was going to have a heart attack. It was his birthday, and he saw this painting on the wall and knew immediately it was a Barbara Latham. And it was from $50, it was marked down to $36, and he ran up to the cashier and purchased it. And we were able to confirm that it was an original piece by her. Probably, again, part of an illustration for a children's book. The piece on the far right of flowers is a crayon, pencil, and pastel piece. We're going to go out into the hallway and see some more, so we'll go this way. This next piece is actually called Kachina by Pablito Velarde, who is an American Indian artist. And the piece next is a print by Jean Kloss. Alice Geneva Jean Kloss was an American artist, and she was known for many of her prints. She was awarded many awards in the 1930s, and she was the sole etcher of the Public Works Project in 1944. She was one of the 3 artists who represented New Mexico at a Paris exhibition called The 3 Centuries of Art in the United States in 1935. This is called Valley of the Valdez. It's an etching. Elizabeth Keener's piece, she was called by Anne. This is Apache Canyon Church in Conecito, New Mexico, and that's just north of Santa Fe. This is, again, one of the more interesting artists that I think I have. This is Marjorie Lee Eaton. She was an American painter and photographer, but she was also a film and television character actor. She joined the art colony in Taos, New Mexico, and she said that she had found her soul when she arrived in Taos. She befriended Juan Mirabal of the Taos Pueblo, and he really became one of her favorite subjects. She then moved to Mexico and lived in a small Mexican village from 1933 to 1935. And she worked with Diego Rivera as well as Calle Frido in New York City. Her painting called Taos Ceremony was exhibited in December of 2008 as part of a retrospective exhibit. And she left her painting career after her heart was broken, and she never returned to painting. But she did become a film star, and her nieces, she never married and she never had any children, but her nieces have collected a large exhibit, and they had a wonderful show at the Fetchin House, the Taos Art Museum in Taos, New Mexico this last year. Unfortunately, due to the COVID virus, the closing reception was canceled. I was unable to meet the nieces, but this is called The Plasters, and it is a watercolor and probably used as a study for a mural that she had completed. So this is Mary Chilton Gray Mendenhall, and this is just simply called Taos. It's 1941. It's an oil on board. And then right here we have an Elin McAfee, and many of you might know her work. She was very, very well known for her horses. She used to have horses in almost all of her paintings. I think I like this one because it actually didn't have any horses in it. But this is a winter in Taos scene. Again, it's an oil on board. Agnes Tate had a successful art career in Chicago and in New York, but her husband's health was declining, and she moved to Santa Fe in 1941. This is Untitled New Mexico Adobe. It's a watercolor on paper. She did many lithographs, and she did a lot of painting for the Fine Arts Museum, where she became very involved in Southwestern landscapes. She did lithographs. She exhibited in 1945 at the Fine Art Museum in New Mexico, and they have done a one-woman show on her work as well. And this is Dwayne Van Vechten. Vechten's lived in Taos, New Mexico, and she studied art at the Chicago Institute. She actually studied under Emil Bistrom in Taos, and she would travel to Taos back and forth from Chicago with her mother. She did marry and then moved permanently to Taos, where they lived in a small studio while they were building their home. But interestingly enough, together, her and her husband built and operated the first grocery store in Taos, and also the Kachina Lodge, which bordered their estate. She actually created the unique southwestern totem pole that's in the center of the Kachina Lodge in the Circular Kiva coffee shop. So if you get a chance to go there, I would encourage you to go see it. It's wonderful. They actually renamed their estate in Taos El Rancho de la Mariposa because of her love of butterflies. So she was a really creative individual, and her art, I think, is also one of my favorites. I studied graphic design in college, and so I have a love for really the graphic design elements of art. So this is another piece by Tate. This is an oil on canvas called Wild Horses. So Alma Jordan Canaber, this is called Pueblo Indians in Taos. She was born and raised in Ohio and attained a teaching diploma at the University of Cincinnati in 1916. She published a test on the art ability for very young children as part of her thesis in 1931. It's called the Canaber Art Ability Test, and actually still being used today to test artistic ability of children. Again, this is Pueblo Indians of Taos. It's a watercolor. So Agnes Martin is a well-known artist. She grew up she was a Canadian-born American, but grew up mostly in New York. She's really considered or referred to as a minimalist, but Martin really thought of herself as an abstract expressionist. She produced the last of her masterpieces just a few months before her death in 2004 at the grand old age of 92. So she worked up to her death. She actually lived in Taos, New Mexico, at one of the aging programs in Taos. She was really very ambivalent about success and was very shy in lots of ways. Interestingly enough, in 1960, she abandoned the art world altogether in New York, and she literally disappeared for about 18 months, and that's when she showed up in a mesa in New Mexico. She did have a mental health diagnosis, and so some of those were the reasons for her inconsistent maybe choices in lifestyle. But she's incredibly well known. She's an artist at the MoMA and in many international museums as well. Erin Currier, what an interesting woman she is. I've met her several times. She's young, beautiful. She's traveled the world. She was studying Buddhist practice for many years when she became involved in looking at how people had generated and discarded paper and things. So one of the things she started to do in her journeys around the world was to collect receipts and invitations to things and pieces of paper that she has now integrated into collages. She found herself really trying to engage in active compassion within the civil rights movement throughout the world, and so many of her pieces depict women in socially unjust ways. Her pieces have become very large. These are some of the earlier pieces that we have. This one is called Lying Buddha, and the piece next to it is called Cave Temple Chowry Bearer Number 1. And again, these are mixed media. So Carol Hoy, this is an untitled piece from 1994. It's an oil on canvas. So Carol Hoy is a contemporary artist as well as Erin Currier. So we're moving into more of a contemporary women that are alive, although one of the artists has recently died, well not recently died, but has Beatrice Mandelman, who's next. But we'll talk a little bit about Carol Hoy. She has a very eclectic approach to art. So this is an oil painting, but across here, next to our film director, Nicole Pereira, who's filming for me, this is actually an encaustic. And encaustics are kind of an interesting technique in that it's a wax application. So she found this to be an interesting technique, and I've actually owned another encaustic. Unfortunately, when I had a fire in my home, the piece literally just like melted to the wall. So it was kind of sad that I lost one of the encaustics, but I was fortunate to replace it with this one. her early landscapes and interior pieces, the series of art gives way to humor. She likes the joke or the unrelenting belief that we are separated from the rest of reality through our art. So, next to this is Beatrice Mandelman B. She actually didn't die in 1998, but again, her pieces are associated with the Taos Moderns. She studied in New York City, and she was employed by the Works Progress Administration. And she came to New Mexico in 1944 with her artist husband, Louis Reebok. Her pieces are very also eclectic. This is a collage. It's a good example how she fused both of her painting and her ink work into a different technique, and she liked to combine these kind of crisp and divine forms. One critic wrote that the twin poles of her work were Cubism and Expressionism. She actually has a wonderful show. She's had some wonderful shows, and there's some information on the PBS series on her and her Taos, time in Taos, called The Taos Painting of Beatrice Mandelman. So I encourage you to go to PBS and watch that series. It's a wonderful show about her work. Holly Roberts is, again, another unique contemporary artist. This is entitled Watercolor in Ink. She's an American visual artist. She actually is the one who sort of started to combine photography and paint together. She caused a stir in this. I mean, it was in the 80s when she was fusing painting and photography together, and she was directly painting on photography pieces. She actually lives and still works in Corrales. Sean Quiptesee. This is called Charlo number 21. It's a pastel from 1986. In the mid-1970s, she really became more prominent as a painter and printmaker, and she became more advanced in her style of painting and collage and drawing and mixed media. She's widely exhibited in many of the permanent collections in prominent art museums in the United States. She actually lives in Corrales, near the Rio Grande. She's an art educator and an art advocate and a political activist. Her obvious work draws from her connection to the Native worldview and comments on American Indian and identifying as an American Indian. So she's a local artist here in New Mexico who's become very well known, and her pieces have recently become much more well recognized. So this is an artist from Taos, up north of Taos. Her name is Rena. This is called River of Gold. It's a colored pencil piece. She uses these really dynamic, crisp colors, almost psychedelic as she describes them. Interestingly enough, she studied in Los Angeles at the Feminist Studio Workshop, and she was there in 1977. The interesting thing about that is that that was a unique 2-year art program that was designed by Judy Chicago. And that was really a way to sort of take emotionally charge of your personal experiences and direct those feelings into finished art pieces. These are two artists who create jewelry. And so these are two artists that I think are very interesting, again, contemporary artists. They both are from the northern New Mexico area, Espanola. Goldie Garcia, who's really the founder of the bottle cap art world. This was a piece that she created for Hillary Clinton's campaign. And then these are the Lady of Guadalupe earrings. Miriam Martinez, who's the piece next to her, the Kachina pin, is from a computer board, so she uses discarded computer pieces and creates art. And interestingly enough, you know, they both live sort of in a very rural, Hispanic kind of culture, yet they're next to Los Alamos, which is probably one of the leading scientific, labs in the United States. So it's this combination of sort of, especially for Mary Martinez, who takes these computer boards and creates these wonderful pieces of art. So I love her pieces. I've had them a very long time. So this is Sarah Anderson. And these are a series of prints. These are called monotypes. So these are not prints that are made in a series like an etching. So these are one-of-a-kind prints. I love Sarah Anderson's work. She lives in Albuquerque, and she's originally from Silver City. But this was a series of pieces that she did called Reclining Beach Bunny, Beach Woman 1, and Beach Bunny. And then the middle piece is called Village Women. I purchased these when we built the spa. I love the images to use in the women's locker room, and I thought that obviously the village women really kind of touched my heart with the seniors that we work for. I think these always depict, sometimes you purchase pieces of art because of where you're at in your own life or what you're doing in your own life and how it complements what you're doing. So these pieces have been hanging here in the spa in various areas. We brought them out so that everybody could see them together as a collection. Again, she lives in Albuquerque. And last but not least, we have Judy Chicago. This is the Through the Flower Twice. It's a lithograph from 1972. It's called a diptych because there's two of them together. And of course, Judy Chicago is an American feminist artist, educator, and writer. Obviously, she is extremely well known. She actually lives in Berlin with her husband, Donald what's Donald's last name? Woodman, yes, Donald Woodman, and he is actually a great photographer as well. Judy Chicago's work incorporates a lot of variety of skills, and her most famous piece, called the Dining Room Table, is a large collaborative effort that includes ceramics, needlework, sewing, and actually it is located in the Elizabeth Sackler Center for Feminist Art at the Brooklyn Museum. That wing was built to actually house the dining room series. So it's called The Dinner Party, and it is probably her best known work. She does have a nonprofit called Through the Flower, which is committed to the public education of the importance of art and how it can be used as a tool to emphasize women's achievement. This is a quick little photograph that I took of Judy with her 80th birthday in Berlin, New Mexico. Interestingly enough, Judy has a strong interest in pyrotechniques, which is this use of smoke and colored smoke to create art installations. So this was her birthday party. They closed down Main Street in Berlin. It was a lot of fun, and you can see she clearly was enjoying herself. So we are happy that you joined us today, and we hope you'll come by and see the show. It's by appointment only. You can please call us at 865-4818 and make an appointment. The show will be up through March of 2021. Each month I'll be trying to focus in on one of the artists, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the artists in this series. Again, we hope you'll come to the Center for Ageless Living and support what we're doing here. The Garden Gate Day Spa and Salon is closed, but we're going to be reopening soon for individual treatments. The Greenhouse Bistro is the restaurant, and it's now open for takeout or picnic in. We have a beautiful park. And senior living systems and personal living systems have been our passion here at the center to help reduce the isolation of aging through our assisted living program and our non-medical homemaker program. So please give us a call. You can reach us at 865-8813 or visit us online at nmagelessliving.com. Thank you.